What if I told you that you don't need a passport, a flight, or a $5,000 vacation budget to feel like you're standing on a Caribbean island? What if the turquoise water, the white sand, the swaying palms, all of it, was already sitting inside the borders of one American state? Most people think of Florida and they picture Disney World, bumper-to-bumper traffic on I-4, or overpriced condos in Miami. But there's another Florida. A quieter one. A wilder one. One that looks so much like the Bahamas or the Virgin Islands that people stop mid-sentence when they see it for the first time. And today, we're going there. 6 destinations. All inside Florida. All hiding in plain sight. Stay with me, because number 2 on this list is the one that even longtime Floridians don't know about. Destination 6, Cedar Key. Most people have never heard of Cedar Key. And the people who have heard of it? They're usually very careful about who they tell. Cedar Key is a small island community sitting about 50 miles southwest of Gainesville, tucked along Florida's nature coast on the Gulf side. To get there, you drive through marshes, over narrow causeways, past egrets and ospreys standing at the edge of still water. And then, almost without warning, you arrive. The town is tiny, just under 1,000 permanent residents. There are no chain restaurants here. No big box stores. No resort complexes. What you get instead are weathered wooden docks, fresh clam chowder served out of a screen door, pelicans perched on every pier post, and a horizon that stretches so wide and so flat it almost doesn't look real. The water around Cedar Key shifts between deep blue and shallow green depending on the tide and the time of day. On calm mornings, it looks exactly like something you'd see in the Turks and Caicos. And here's the part that matters for anyone thinking practically: Cedar Key is still remarkably affordable. Waterfront cottages, historic homes, rental properties, they exist here at price points that have long since disappeared from the rest of Florida's coast. The trade-off? Isolation. Limited medical infrastructure. And it does sit in a hurricane-vulnerable zone that any serious buyer needs to research carefully. But if what you're looking for is the Caribbean feeling without the Caribbean price tag, Cedar Key is where that conversation starts. Destination 5, Isla Morada, Florida Keys. Okay, the Florida Keys are not exactly a secret. But Isla Morada specifically, the stretch of islands between Key Largo and Marathon, is a different experience from Key West's famous party scene, and it deserves its own conversation. Isla Morada calls itself the sport fishing capital of the world. But even if you've never picked up a fishing rod in your life, this place will get under your skin. The water here is the thing. On both sides of the overseas highway, you're surrounded by the Atlantic and the Gulf simultaneously. The color, and this sounds like exaggeration, but it isn't, it genuinely looks like someone poured liquid aquamarine over the shallows. On a clear day, with the light right, you could close your eyes, listen to the water, open them, and genuinely believe you were somewhere in the Caribbean. Isla Morada has boutique resorts, open-air seafood restaurants, world-class snorkeling, and a pace of life that tells rush hour to go find somewhere else. The real estate market here is among the most expensive in Florida, that's the honest truth. Waterfront property commands serious prices, and insurance costs in the Keys are a category of their own. But for the buyer or retiree who's done their homework and has the budget, Isla Morada offers a lifestyle that most people only dream about. Destination 4, Caladesi Island State Park, Dunedin. Here's where things start to get interesting. Caladesi Island sits just off the coast of Dunedin, a charming, walkable small city on Florida's Gulf Coast north of Clearwater. And to reach Caladesi Island, you have to take a ferry. That ferry ride is what keeps the island exactly as it needs to be. No cars. No development. No hotels. No crowds, at least not by any modern definition of the word. What you find on Caladesi Island is 3 miles of white sand beach that consistently ranks among the best beaches in the entire United States. Not just Florida. The country. The water is shallow, calm, and clear. The sand is so fine it squeaks under your feet. Dolphins appear regularly in the afternoon. Ospreys patrol overhead. And because there's no road access, the island retains something that most of Florida's coastline lost decades ago, a feeling of genuine discovery. Now, you can't live on Caladesi Island. But you can live in Dunedin, which has become one of the most desirable small cities in the Tampa Bay region. Walkable downtown. craft breweries, farmers markets, a strong sense of community, and direct access to some of the most Caribbean-like water in the continental United States. For retirees especially, Dunedin combined with Caladesi access is one of those rare combinations that doesn't require compromise. Destination 3, Fort de Soto Park and the Tierra Verde area, Pinellas County. We're staying on Florida's Gulf Coast because this side of the state is doing something the Atlantic side simply cannot replicate. Fort de Soto Park is a 5-island park at the southern tip of Pinellas County, just south of St. Petersburg. It has consistently been named among the top beaches in America, and the reason is simple: the water. On the Gulf side of Fort de Soto, the water is so warm, so clear, and so vividly colored that travel writers have been comparing it to the Caribbean for 30 years. Swimming here in July when the Gulf settles into bath temperature warmth is an experience that stops conversation. The surrounding area, particularly the small community of Tierra Verde, is worth paying attention to for anyone considering relocation. It's a quiet island community connected to the mainland by bridge, surrounded by water on all sides, close enough to St. Petersburg to access every urban amenity, but removed enough to feel genuinely separate from the city. Prices here have risen, no question. But they remain more accessible than comparable waterfront properties in Miami, Naples, or the Keys. And the lifestyle, morning kayaking through mangrove tunnels, evening walks on beaches that glow orange at sunset, that lifestyle is available here in a way that few places can honestly match. Now here's something most people get wrong when they start searching for these kinds of places. They look at the photos. They fall in love with the watercolor. They picture themselves there. And then they start calling realtors. But the question that almost nobody asks, the one that separates the people who make smart decisions from the ones who end up in a very difficult situation, is this: what does this place cost to live in, not just to visit? Because some of these destinations are genuinely accessible. And some of them look like paradise but carry hidden financial risks that can wipe out retirement savings if you're not careful. Keep watching. Because destination number 2 is the one that gets both of those things right, and most people have never heard of it. Destination 2, Anna Maria Island. If you've never heard of Anna Maria Island, you're in good company. It sits at the northern tip of Longboat Key, just off the coast of Bradenton, about 45 minutes south of Tampa. The island is 7 miles long. It has no traffic lights. The speed limit is a firm and unhurried 15 miles per hour in most areas. And the beaches on Anna Maria Island belong on a different planet from most of what Florida's overbuilt coastline has become. The sand is white and deep and powdery. The Gulf water here carries that same impossible turquoise that you see in photographs from Aruba or the Cayman Islands, and people who come here for the first time say the same thing: every time, I didn't expect it to look like this. The community is small and intentional. Short-term rentals are increasingly regulated, which has the effect of preserving a neighborhood atmosphere rather than converting the whole island into a hotel. There are local fish houses, ice cream shops that have operated for decades, and a boardwalk culture that belongs to a slower, more honest era of Florida. From a real estate standpoint, Anna Maria Island is not cheap. Waterfront and near-water properties have appreciated significantly, and insurance costs require serious due diligence. But it is still more attainable than comparable island communities in the Keys or on the East Coast. And the combination of Caribbean aesthetics, strong rental demand for investors, and a community that's actively trying to preserve its character makes it worth examining closely. Destination 1, the Forgotten Coast, Apalachicola, Cape San Blas, and the St. Joe Peninsula. And now we arrive at the one. The stretch of Florida's Panhandle coastline known as the Forgotten Coast, centered around the small fishing town of Apalachicola and extending west toward Cape San Blas and the St. Joseph Peninsula State Park, is, without any exaggeration, one of the most visually stunning and undervalued coastal areas in the entire United States. The water here is different. Because the Forgotten Coast sits far from major river runoff and has very little coastal development behind it, the Gulf water here reaches a level of clarity and color that genuinely competes with anything in the Caribbean basin. At Cape San Blas, the water shifts from pale jade in the shallows to deep cobalt further out. The sand is brilliant white, and because this stretch of coast faces south rather than west, it catches light differently than most of Florida in a way that makes the whole scene feel lit from within. Apalachicola itself is a town that time has treated kindly and commerce has largely left alone. It has galleries, oyster houses, Victorian architecture, and a port that still functions as a working waterfront. The population is small, around 2,000, and the pace of life is something that urban America genuinely cannot manufacture. Here's what makes the Forgotten Coast the #1 destination on this list. It is still affordable. Not relatively affordable. Actually affordable. So what's the thread connecting all 6 of these places? They're all part of the real Florida. The one that existed before the theme parks and the condo towers and the traffic. The one that still surfaces in quiet corners of the state if you know where to look. And here's something worth sitting with. The places in America that feel most like somewhere else, somewhere calmer, slower, more beautiful, are almost always the places that the mainstream hasn't fully monetized yet. Once the developers arrive, once the influencers take over, once the short-term rental market saturates every block, the thing that made the place special in the first place begins to disappear. Every destination on this list is at a different stage of that process. Cedar Key and Apalachicola are early. Anna Maria and Isla Morada are further along. But all of them still have something genuine left. For retirees, especially people making real decisions about where to spend real years of their lives, these distinctions matter enormously. The financial picture, the community character, the resilience of the local economy, the insurance landscape, the hurricane history, none of this is visible in the photographs. All of it is visible in the research. The Caribbean feeling is real in each of these places. What varies is the cost, in dollars and in trade-offs, of actually living inside it. 6 destinations. All inside Florida. All carrying that quality that most Americans have to buy a plane ticket to find. Cedar Key, if you want isolation and authenticity at a price that still makes sense. Isla Morada, if you want the Keys experience without Key West's noise. Caladesi Island in Dunedin, if you want world-class water with a real community around it. Fort de Soto and Tierra Verde, if you want Gulfside color with urban access nearby. Anna Maria Island, if you want the full package beauty, community, and a coastline that will genuinely stop you in your tracks. And the Forgotten Coast Apalachicola, Cape San Blas, the St. Joe Peninsula, if you want the most honest, most affordable, most visually remarkable version of everything Florida's water can be. These places exist. They're real. And the window on several of them, the window where the price, the community, and the experience are all still aligned, that window doesn't stay open forever. The Caribbean isn't always across an ocean. Sometimes it's just a long drive down an empty road, past marshes and pines and egrets standing at the edge of still water.